Emily had been feeling a gnawing sense of unease for weeks. Jake, her boyfriend of 3 years, had suddenly become distant, always glued to his phone, disappearing for late work meetings that seemed to multiply every week. At first, she tried to reassure herself it was probably stress, or maybe he just needed some space. But the nagging suspicion refused to let her rest. Something about the way he avoided eye contact, the hurried texts that he deleted almost immediately, told her that something was off. That fateful evening, Emily's doubts reached a breaking point. She had returned home earlier than usual from a friend's dinner, deciding to surprise Jake with his favorite takeout. The apartment was eerily quiet. She called out his name, but there was no answer. Then, from the slightly ajar door of his home office, she heard the unmistakable sounds of a betrayal she had feared. Jake's laughter mingled with someone else's, voices she didn't recognize. Her heart lurched in her chest. Peeking inside, she caught the shocking scene. Jake, the man she had trusted, was intimately involved with another woman. Her stomach churned with a mix of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. For a long moment, she simply froze watching, her mind spinning with every betrayal she could imagine. Tears welled up, but they were swiftly replaced by a burning, icy determination. She refused to be a victim of his deceit. As she backed away silently, her mind began racing with possibilities for retribution. Emily wasn't a violent person, but she knew how to teach a lesson he wouldn't forget. Her gaze fell on the small shelf in the bathroom where Jake kept his personal items. That's when the idea hit her. She could make him face the consequences of his own arrogance in the most absurdly humiliating way possible. The thought of him being helpless, panicked, and exposed without causing lasting harm made a wicked smile creep across her face. She would turn his betrayal into his own personal nightmare. That night, while he slept, Emily slipped into the bathroom and carefully swabbed the contents of Jake's personal lubricant with a strong, industrial-strength adhesive. Every detail had to be perfect. She was determined that his comeuppance would be unforgettable. As she worked, her mind replayed the scene she had just witnessed, and a sense of satisfaction simmered beneath her anger. Finally, she stood back, admiring her handiwork. Revenge, she thought, could be sweet, and this was only the beginning. Jake had no idea that the quiet, composed Emily who kissed him goodbye that morning was carrying a storm behind her eyes. As far as he knew, she had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. In reality, Emily was very much still in town, sitting in her car a few streets away, scrolling through the private security app connected to the tiny camera she had installed in the living room months ago. Jake had never bothered asking why she wanted extra security, if only he knew the irony now. That evening, Jake moved around the apartment with an enthusiasm that made Emily's stomach twist, not because she still loved him, but because he was preparing for his date with the same woman she had caught in his office. The nerve of him, the way he hummed as he cleaned the living room, lit candles, and sprayed cologne everywhere made her grip the steering wheel harder. He was so confident, so smug, so certain he would get away with everything, it almost made her laugh. Emily watched as the doorbell rang and Jake swung the door open with a grin too wide to be innocent. His co-worker stepped inside, giggling, acting as if the entire situation was some thrilling secret rendezvous. Emily rolled her eyes so hard she nearly hurt herself. She didn't care who the woman was. The revenge was for Jake, not her. Inside, they poured cheap wine like it was a celebration. Jake bragged about how complicated things had been with Emily lately, how he needed someone who understood him. Emily snorted at the lie. If only he knew how well she understood him now. As the evening went on, they drifted closer together. Emily didn't need to see every detail. She merely needed to watch him confidently reach for the very item she had tampered with. The bottle sat innocently on the bedside shelf, like a trap laid by a hunter who's already celebrating the victory. Emily leaned closer to the screen, her expression cold and anticipating. This was the moment she had been waiting for, when Jake's arrogance would collide with her precision. She held her breath, a wicked thrill running through her. Every second felt like a countdown. Every movement he made pushing him closer to the chaos she had crafted. He was so sure tonight would be perfect. He had no idea it was about to become the The moment arrived faster than Emily had imagined. Jake, completely oblivious, had finally reached for the bottle she had tampered with. He squeezed, and the thick, sticky glue oozed out instead of the slick lubricant he expected. At first, neither he nor his co-worker realized what had happened. A puzzled glance, a confused frown, but within seconds, the horrifying truth became painfully obvious. Panic erupted instantly. They both yelped, trying to pull away, but the adhesive had already begun its relentless work. Hands, limbs, and an unfortunately strategic area were now glued together in a way that made every movement impossible. The apartment was filled with frantic shouting, confused curses, and desperate attempts to separate themselves without touching anything else. It was chaos in its purest form, a human tangle of horror and absurdity. Emily, watching from a distance through her camera feed, could barely contain herself. The disbelief, the terror, the flailing, it was like watching a slapstick comedy unfold in real time. Part of her felt a pang of guilt, but it was buried beneath a bubbling sense of vindication. Every curse Jake spat out, every desperate plea, felt like a poetic justice that she had meticulously orchestrated. Meanwhile, the neighbors were becoming alarmed. The shouting was loud enough to echo through the hallways and into the street. One neighbor, assuming the worst, had already called 911. The dispatcher, straining to understand, could barely keep from laughing while sending firefighters to a domestic emergency involving entangled individuals. Inside the apartment, the situation deteriorated further. Chairs tipped, cushions flew, and a lamp teetered dangerously on the edge of a table. Every frantic attempt to escape made the glue work even faster, ensuring the chaos intensified. Jake's smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by panic and the crushing realization that his arrogance had led to this sticky, humiliating catastrophe. Emily sipped her coffee quietly, trying not to laugh too loudly in her car. This was more than revenge, it was a masterpiece of timing, irony, and poetic justice, and best of all, help was on the way. She knew that soon, professionals would arrive to untangle the mess, but by then, the humiliation would already be complete. The absurdity of it all made her chest ache with suppressed laughter. Jake had thought he was untouchable. Tonight, he had learned, in the most ridiculous way possible, that betrayal comes with consequences, and some lessons stick, literally. Within minutes, the wail of sirens echoed down the quiet street. Emily watched, barely able to stifle her laughter, as a fire truck screeched to a halt outside Jake's apartment building. A team of firefighters jumped out, their faces a mix of concern and bewilderment as they approached the apartment. They had been trained for fires, accidents, and even daring rescues, but a human adhesive entanglement was a scenario that didn't exactly appear in their manuals. The front door burst open, and they were greeted by a scene that was both alarming and bizarre. Jake and his co-worker were now hopelessly stuck together, limbs flailing, faces red with panic and embarrassment. Wine glasses teetered on overturned tables. Cushions were strewn everywhere, and a small lamp hung precariously from a corner. The firefighters exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging that this would be a delicate operation. "Ma'am, are you related to them?" one firefighter asked, scanning the chaos. Emily, standing safely in her car nearby, shook her head innocently when he called her on the phone. No. "Just a neighbor reporting the commotion," she said, her voice carefully neutral, hiding the fact that she had orchestrated every moment. Inside, the team assessed the situation. They applied careful strategy. First, keeping the two calm enough to avoid panic-induced injuries. Then using a combination of warm water, solvents, and precision maneuvers to slowly loosen the adhesive. Every tug was cautious, every movement measured. The entangled pair's frantic shouting made coordination difficult, but the professionals persevered. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours for Jake and his co-worker. They squirmed, protested, and swore, but gradually, the glue's grip loosened. It was painstaking work, and the absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on the firefighters. They suppressed chuckles, maintaining professionalism, but the ridiculousness was impossible to ignore. Two adults stuck together like an awkward science experiment gone horribly wrong. Finally, After what seemed like an eternity, the two were separated. Both were red-faced, humiliated, and exhausted from the struggle. The apartment, meanwhile, looked like a war zone. Knocked over furniture, scattered cushions, spilled wine, and a few charred edges from the lamp's precarious position. Outside, Emily sat in her car, sipping coffee and trying not to laugh out loud. The fire department had done their job, but the lesson was already delivered. Arrogance, betrayal, and underestimating someone like Emily could lead to disasters beyond imagination. The next morning, Jake awoke to a quiet apartment that looked like a tornado had passed through. Cushions were still scattered, a lamp hung crookedly, and faint streaks of adhesive remained as a humiliating reminder of the previous night's chaos. His co-worker had left as soon as they were separated, leaving him alone to stew in embarrassment. Every attempt to remove the last traces of glue was a reminder of his failure and, more importantly, of Emily's revenge. Word of the incident spread faster than he could imagine. A few neighbors had already shared the story with friends, embellishing it with every retelling. By mid-morning, Jake's phone was blowing up with messages, some concerned, some incredulous, and a few downright mocking. He couldn't escape the humiliation. His once proud image of charm and control had crumbled overnight, replaced with the reputation of the man who had literally gotten stuck because of his infidelity. Emily, meanwhile, felt a quiet satisfaction as she scrolled through social media, seeing the news posts and the gossip circulating about her handiwork. She didn't need to rub it in. The universe had done that for her. Betrayal, she realized, often carries its own punishment, but a little planning can make the lesson unforgettable. Later that evening, she walked past Jake's building casually, smiling to herself. He peeked out the window, red-faced and muttering under his breath, clearly realizing that he could never undo what had happened. Emily felt a sense of closure. The anger that had burned inside her had finally cooled, replaced with the sweet, quiet satisfaction of poetic justice. Jake had learned the hard way that trust is fragile, and betrayal carries consequences, even absurd, sticky ones. As for Emily, she finally felt free, unburdened, and amused. Revenge had been served, and it had stuck literally and metaphorically.